questions?
If Israel is looking for secure people, why do you allow and in some cases even pay people to live in illegal settlements in the heart of the West Bank when you consider that to be enemy territory?
Endless issue of the settlement. Look, again, I can argue with you. I can refer to international law. There is a very good case why those settlements are not illegal. Sometimes people confuse terms. For example, a lot of members in the international community believe that the settlements are not productive. They are not defined as illegal. Illegal is something else. I will not get now into the legal arguments, although I can say that the whole land was promised as a land in which Jews can build on. In the Balfour Declaration by the British government, 1917, then it was incorporated into the League of Nations mandate. Then the League of Nations decisions were incorporated into the Charter of the UN. So legally, there is a clear line between the Balfour Declaration that says that Jews have the right to live, to build throughout the land until the creation of the UN and the Charter of the UN. So there is a legal argument why the settlements are legal. But it goes beyond that.
Well, what would you
want? Just a second. We want to survive. We want to survive in this land. You see this thin line? This is roughly the Palestinian Authority. This little gray part. The purple part is the state of Israel.
Well, didn't it all initially used to be Palestine?
Sorry?
Well, initially it all used to be Palestine, however.
Yes, when? Okay, that's a different question. We will get to that. That's also, sorry to say, but it's not true. But we will get to that in a second, don't worry. But the fact is that before the settlements, before the war of 1967, Israel was attacked time and again by its Arab neighbors, by the Kingdom of Jordan, which ruled this territory, by the way, illegally. Israel was attacked time and again from this area, which from it they tried to cut Israel in half. Because there is such a small place, Israel is so narrow at this point that it can be easily cut in half by whoever rules the West Bank. Look, we don't want it to happen again. We want to survive. We do not want to expose our throat to the enemy. So a lot of the settlements, most of the settlements are in this part of the West Bank, which actually gives us the strategic room to maneuver. We feel that this part of the West Bank has to be held by Israel in order to guarantee us from such a strike. And we can compensate for that. If you look at what was offered to the Palestinians by 2000 and 2008 by two different Israeli prime ministers, they said yes, this narrow part of land will become Israeli territory. But you will get something for that. You will get the land over here, over here, over here to connect with the Gaza Strip. So in the end, you will have 100% of the disputed land. Just not this part, because we need this part to guarantee our survival. They refused. They refused, although we offered them 100% of the disputed land. So again, if you look at the real cause, for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, sorry to say, it's not the settlement. It's not the settlement, because the conflict existed a long time before the settlements. The PLO, the organization of Yasser Arafat, was created in 1964. 3 years before the Six-Day War, 3 years before we came to control the West Bank, and of course many years before the first settlement. So that is not the reason for the conflict. And this is something that can be solved, if you want to solve it. And what you said before about the fact that all of the land used to be Palestine. So since you said that, please tell me, what was the name of the Palestinian prime minister or king or whoever ruled this land in the name of the Palestinian people? When was that and what was his name?
To be honest, I don't know, and I don't feel that that's relevant.
But you say that it was a Palestinian land. So I'm asking you when it was a Palestinian land, and what was the name of the Palestinian leader who ruled that land? I'm asking you. You said.
Well, I told you, I do not personally know that. And I,
So
as I said before, I don't feel that's relevant.
Let me enlighten you. It was never a Palestinian land because before the 20th century, there was never a Palestinian people.
Well, what about all those maps prior to World War II which say Palestine?
The origin of the name Palestine goes to the Philistines of the Bible, which were people that came from Greek and all. It doesn't matter. It was called Palestine. It was called Palestine by the British, who used the name that was given to this piece of land by the Romans. We used this name Palestine because of the ancient Philistines that came from this island of Crete and were manifested themselves somewhere here. That was 1,000 years BC. They have absolutely no connection or no relevance to this matter. They're not the Palestinians. This is just the origin of the name Palestine, which was given to this name. Something else to prove.
So if there were no Palestinians pre-1917, how are there 6 million Palestinian refugees? Where did they come from, if they didn't come from?
There were people living in this land all the time. Some of them were Jews, some of them were Arabs. They were not Palestinians.
And the majority of them were from where? Were Arabs or Jews?
That depends throughout the century. Maybe
In the 18th century, in the 19th century, early 19th century.
Probably the majority was Arab.
Okay.
There were no credible, no census was made. But probably from what we know, until the 7th century, most of them were Jews. Then came,
The 7th century?
7th century.
Okay.
Then majority was Jews. Then came the tribes in the Arab Peninsula with the arguments like who was there first will get you nowhere. Because, you know what, let's say that you believe in what you're saying, and you think that the country was Arab first, although it wasn't, but never mind.
I'm not claiming that
It's
it was Arab first. I wasn't claiming that.
Let's say that
I was claiming that the majority of the people in the 19th century and the 20th century were Arabs, but I'm not sure, is that correct or incorrect?
Probably it is correct. Probably it is correct.
Okay,
But
and
there were something like 600,000, something like that.
as opposed to how many Jews?
100, 200, 300, nobody knows. But I can tell you what happened. This was the situation by the 19th century. Then came Jewish immigrants throughout the 19th century, the 20th century. And by 1948, it was something like half and half, Israelis and Arabs. And then there was the plan of the UN, the partition plan, to create 2 states in the area. And what they basically did was that they offered us something like 40%. They offered the Arabs, the Palestinians as we call it, 60%. Clearly, they offered us the worst piece of land. They offered us the desert and the swamps. They offered them the Galilee, the West Bank, all the areas which are much more friendly to humans. And it's very simple. We said yes, they said no. That is, now we're thinking about documented history. They started a war, it was a civil war, then all of the Arab countries joined them. Nobody gave us really a chance. Nevertheless, we stood our ground. A lot of them fled. And that is how the problem of the Palestinian refugees, that is how this problem started. Why did they flee the country? Because when they started this civil war, they said that we will throw the Jews to the sea. Now this area will see slaughtering like the times of the Mongols. That was the fate that we knew that was coming for us. And when we started winning, they, logically from their part, they assumed that we will do to them what they were going to do for us. So they fled the country. In the end, of course, it was completely, it was a mistake, because those Arabs that stayed, they became citizens, they became equal citizens in the state of Israel, nothing happened to them. But those who escaped, those who fled the country, they want for them and for all their offspring to come back. That is something we cannot accept. This is changing back the wheel of history. They started this war. They called this war an all or nothing war. So, to put it bluntly, they have to suffer the consequences.
So you said that Palestinians and Israelis are equal citizens. Is a Palestinian allowed to vote in parliament?
Sorry?
Is a Palestinian allowed to vote? Does he have a right to vote? Or just like an Israeli, or does he not have the right to vote?
All Israelis have the right to go to parliament. So there are Arab ministers, there are Arab parties. We have 3 or 4 Arab parties. We have an Arab Muslim party, we have an Arab National Party, and we have an Arab Communist Party. None of these parties are exactly crazy about Israel, but they are part of the Israeli parliament. Now, I don't know, if you're speaking about Israeli Arabs, then that is the situation. If you're speaking about the Palestinians, those who live in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, of course, they are not Israeli citizens. They should vote for the Palestinian parliament in Ramallah. So they should. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that the solution would be a 2-state solution. One state for the Israelis, where everybody can vote and everybody can take part in the political life, like we have now. Jews and Arabs, it doesn't matter. And one state for the Palestinians who live here and here. They would have their own parliament, their own government, and that is where they can express their rights to take part in the political life. That is the answer to the solution.
Excuse me. Sadly, I have some numbers that I can correct. In 1947, there were 1.25 million Palestinians in the land of Palestine, and 500,000 Jews, as you said. It wasn't 50-50, it was more of a 30-70. While the Palestinians owned 93% of the land. The UN plan of partition, which I have it here, it gave 53% of the land to the Jews, who were 30% of the population, and gave 47% to the Palestinians, who were 70% of the population. Well, you see that the Jewish state here in white has the Galilee, which is the most fertile land. Well, it has the desert, it has the most fertile land, but it also has the largest coastline in the land of Palestine, including the city of Haifa, Akka, and Tel Aviv, Ashdod, Ashkelon, which are main ports. So there was absolutely no reason for the Palestinians to accept this plan, because it was taking their land from 93% to 47% and giving, well, actually dividing their population into putting 500,000 of their population in the Jewish state, where you have 500,000 Jews. They're putting their brothers and sisters in a state that was, by definition, hostile for them. So why should they accept it? I also would like to make another point. Palestinians inside Israel, Israeli citizens, they're Israeli citizens indeed, but they're not equal. They don't have equal rights, and they are discriminated against in many ways. We can go into that, but if you want that.
I will refer to that.
It's true that Palestinian citizens of Israel can vote, but that's only one aspect of democracy. The other aspects are human rights, equality, dividing resources equally between the citizens, and that does not happen in Israel. So claiming that Israel is a democratic state isn't accurate at all. And I have a question for you about what you said earlier. You said that it's essential for Israel to occupy parts of the West Bank because Jordan wanted to occupy part of Israel and separate Israel into 2 halves. But later you said that in 2000 and 2008, 2 different prime ministers offered to compensate the Palestinian Authority with land connecting the West Bank to Gaza. So is that right?
Yes.
So aren't you contradicting yourself? So Israel
No.
offered to cut itself in
there
half?
are ways to connect it. There are ways to connect it. You know, when it's us who are doing that, we can make sure that our security will not be hampered. While if they are attacked from the east to the west, this is something different entirely. But let me refer to what you're saying. I think that it's really good that you brought this information and the maps. First of all, the numbers, they are disputed, like I said, credible census and so the numbers are not clear. There were no, it's not true that there were 1.5 million Arabs there, but again, it doesn't really matter. For sure, you don't claim that the fact that they might have not agreed with the plan of partition. By the way, I think the plan that you have is not the plan from 1947. The plan from 1947 offered us a smaller part of the land. You're speaking about something else. But never mind that. For sure, you cannot support the fact, they had the right to refuse this plan. But the fact that they immediately started a war of destruction, a war of annihilation, a war which they said the direction of this war is to throw the Jews into the sea, to commit mass-scale slaughtering. I'm sure that this is not something that you can support. They started the war, they lost the war, there is a price to pay. That's what I'm saying.
Of course,
and we will not agree to reverse the war. If we want to reach a solution, we must look towards the future, not towards the past. What you're saying is actually look towards the past. Let's continue and wage the 1948 war. First of all, your side will lose this war. Second of all, it's not good for neither of us. That is not the direction. The direction is towards the future. And some words about the situation of Arabs in Israel. Look, if you expect me to stand here and tell you that the situation of Arabs in Israel is perfect, I'm not going to do that. There are problems. There are problems. We try to combat the problems. If you look at the laws, they are perfectly equal. There are laws against discrimination. There are if you get discriminated against, you can appeal to the court system, and they will deal with that. But if you look at all the parameters of education, of economical wealth, certainly of political freedom, you will see that Arabs in Israel are doing much better than Arabs almost all over the Middle East. And the best proof for that is the fact that the Israeli Arabs don't want to be part of Palestine in the future agreement. They want to stay in Israel. They do not want to be annexed.
Do you have a poll saying that?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have numbers or just
many,
statements?
many, trust me on that. Many polls. They don't want to be ruled by the Palestinian government. They want to continue their lives in Israel because they know it's much, much better for them to live in Israel. And please, disagree. But is there any other place in the Middle East in which an Arab citizen can express their political will in free and fair elections, except from the state of Israel? If there is a place like that, please tell me.
Egypt.
I don't know.
So what you're saying is that because the other countries have problems with their human rights issues, this gives Israel the right to treat its Arab citizens and the Palestinians under its occupation in a bad way, because other people are treating their citizens badly. Is that the reasoning?
Not at all. As I said, Arabs in Israel, they get all of the rights. We're trying, if there are cases of discrimination, we're trying to fight it. However, the attention is that they are getting. I'm sure that you are an activist, maybe you wrote some letters, maybe you try to express your opinions about Arabs in Israel. I wonder, if you try to express your opinions about the situation of women in Saudi Arabia.
No, yes, I do.
Because I think
against discrimination everywhere.
Then that is very good. That is very good. But most of the people who are so concerned about the rights of Arabs in Israel, they don't say one thing about the fact that in this country, 50% of the population can't even drive. I'm not speaking about voting, because nobody votes in Saudi Arabia, but they can't even drive.
No, you're right about that, and it's sad.
Thank you.
But I would
Okay,
like
more questions?
Okay, as far as discrimination goes, and you say you guys are fighting discrimination, I've gone to Palestine once a year the last 4 years, so it's a relatively new situation. I'm an American citizen, I was born in New York, and you talk about how you guys are fighting discrimination and all this stuff, but I go with my mother who wears a scarf, and I go to the checkpoint to get in. I have an American passport. The person in front of me who goes has an American passport. He's clearly someone from here, just a tourist, all this stuff. He gets in, no problem. I go, I get held up for 8 hours while you guys question me. You have to know everything, and that's fine. You want to be safe. You see my mom with the scar, if you're worried, fine. But then you're talking about how there's no discrimination everywhere I go, even with my American passport. I get held up, whereas other people with the American passport don't get held up. And this isn't even like an issue about Israel or Palestine anymore for me. It's more of an issue of human rights. And you talk to me about casualties and all this stuff, but if you look at like the numbers between like casualties, like especially more recently, between Israel and Palestine, the majority of the casualties are from Palestine. And as someone who goes to Palestine every year and has family on the West Bank, like you're telling me about how you guys are trying to work out the solution and all this stuff, and like we're terrorists, but like I spend a month there and I get treated like crap. Like I can't go anywhere, I can't do anything, I can't speak to anyone, and I'm pretty educated. I go to a really good university. I'm American, like I'm civil, I don't do anything wrong. And like my family there gets treated like absolute crap. Like I think like it all comes down to like human rights. And when like you're not letting humanitarian aid groups in, and like you're launching these wars, like you guys kind of put yourself in a situation where there's not going to be a two-state solution.
I tell you that we're sorry for that. We're sorry for every person who doesn't mean any harm. They are not terrorists, and they suffer in those checkpoints. And it's true. It's true. But we don't see any alternative, because if there were no checkpoints, people will get killed. And by the time of the second Intifada, by the early 2000s, we had 1,000 Israelis killed in buses, in shopping malls, in the city streets, by suicide bombers. Some of them were women, some of them were disguised, they were women, and they were disguised as pregnant women, carrying the explosive belt under their clothes, wearing the scarf. So, really, what can we do? What other option do we have? We don't want to see more people getting killed. We don't want to see that. And don't tell me that this is because of the settlements and all that, because it existed before the settlements. And look what happened. Clearly, yes, the human rights issue, it's a problem for us. It's a problem for any Western army who's trying to fight terrorists, which are operating using human shields, using civilians as human shields. But take a look at what happened when we cleared the Gaza Strip completely. We moved all our forces, all our settlers. We dismantled the settlers in the Gaza Strip. We left it completely to the hands of the Palestinians. What we got in return? We evacuated 8,000 settlers. We got back 8,000 prophets and more. They keep coming. And you said, without any excuse, on Israeli towns and villages surrounding the Gaza Strip, and you said that you have more Palestinian casualties than Israelis who were killed. That may be true. But just, you know what, let's isolate. Let's isolate. Let's just take a look on what we had here in the past 2 weeks. Between the Gaza Strip and those Israeli towns and villages who are close to the Gaza Strip. Without any reason, this rocketing of those Israeli towns and villages continued. So we had a barrage of rockets coming down on us from the Gaza Strip in the recent 2 weeks. Nobody was killed, but we had a school bus, a yellow school bus, that was targeted with anti-tank rockets that was launched by the Hamas. So nobody was killed, but we had one person injured and one 16-year-old kid fatally injured. So we don't know if he will make it or not. So we retaliated. But when we retaliate against the sources of fire. So if somebody is firing on us, let's say from an orange grove or from a neighborhood, and we clearly identify the source of fire, we fire back to that point, because if it's done within a minute or so, we can hit this unit who launched the missile. So we do that. And when we do that, sometimes civilians get hurt. And we are sorry for that, but we have no other choice. because they are deliberately locating their source of fire within civilians, because they try to use them as human shields. And when we see civilians there, we do not fire back. But sometimes we don't see the civilians there, because it is in the heart of a neighborhood. And if it's, let's say, a unit is launching out of the window of a house, sometimes we have no choice but to strike back. Sometimes we think it's a deserted house, sometimes it seems like just like a shed, sometimes it's not. You know, it's choosing between bad options. We cannot, the one thing that we cannot do is sit and do nothing. If somebody is firing on us, we have the right to fire back. We have the right to fire back. And that's how people are getting killed. Now, if you look at the majority of the casualties, they are Hamas people. They are. Did you hear of Judge Goldstone?
Maybe
Yeah,
like
author,
one person. But
the
like
author of the, wait a second, the author of the famous Goldstone report that was written after the war in Gaza and so on, blaming that Israel, that the most of the casualties were civilians and so on. That is not true. And after he reviewed all the investigations that were made and so on, he came back on what he was saying. And he said that the Israeli case was the true one, that most of the casualties were fighters. And you know on what he based it? He based it on the list of the Hamas. Because Hamas published a list of their martyrs, of the people who died while engaging Israeli troops. And the majority of the victims were those people, were those lists. It's just a fact.
Just to clarify a term that you keep using, so I basically have like a three-part question, which is, could you please define the term terrorism? And then also, do you consider the acts of violence committed by Palestinians to be acts of terrorism? And then also, do you also consider the acts of violence committed by Israelis against Palestinians to be acts of terrorism? And how do you make those distinctions when you're using that term?
I think that's a very good question. All in all, the international community was not able to agree on exactly what terrorism is, although everybody is using this term. I think a good way to distinguish a terrorist from another combatant is that the terrorist is engaging civilians in purpose, knowing that these are civilians and this is his target. When your target is a civilian target, then you're a terrorist. And this is, I mean, if you read the laws of war, the international laws of war, that is basically what they're saying. So if you look at Hamas and other terrorist organizations, that is clearly what they're doing. They're launching those missiles to Israeli villages, trying to hit civilians. It's very clear. They publish it, they brag about it. In Gaza there were road signs, not road signs, but like commercials of the Hamas. When you see an Israeli village with its white walls and red rooftops, and the rockets coming down on this village. So they brag about it. It's true that Israeli retaliation sometimes hits civilians, but this is not our target. We are trying to hit those Hamas units, which are located deliberately in areas where civilians live. They are trying to use their own civilians as human shields. And we try to isolate, we try to pick the targets. There have been numerous cases in which our soldiers did not carry out the mission because they saw the immediate presence of civilians there.
So are you saying that they're inadvertently committing acts of terrorism?
No. Saying again, when your target is a military target, then this is not terrorism. If the other side, under the laws of war, it is forbidden to deploy military units inside a civilian population area. It is not allowed, because the whole essence of the military, of the laws of war, is to try to distinguish between soldiers and civilians. So our soldiers were uniformed, your soldiers were uniformed. The Hamas deliberately does not wear uniforms because they want to blend in to the civilian population, because they want to use them as a shield. That is a war crime. When you try to engage those units and you try to distinguish them from civilians, that is not a war crime. And if civilians are being killed unintentionally, that is not a war crime. Sometimes it can be a negligent decision by a military commander, and then they should face charges and all that. But that is not a war crime. We have many military experts. The most known one is the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, who said that no other Western army is trying so hard to distinguish civilians and combatants than the Israeli army. And if you look at what NATO is doing in Afghanistan, if you look at what NATO is doing in Iraq, they are facing the same problem of terrorists trying to hide behind the backs of civilians, and sometimes there are civilians who get killed in Afghanistan, in Iraq too. It's not something which is unique to Israel. It's just the nature of asymmetric warfare.
Yeah, you're talking about the human shields. I was reading an article in The Guardian that was saying that Israel actually used Palestinians in some cases, tying them to the front of their convoys to protect them in the West Bank. So they're using civilians as literal human shields, either that or to draw fire, or to walk them in combatant rooms. So if anyone was to get shot, it would be, young people or the elderly or whoever they had decided to coerce into their military operations. So just as far as the human shields go, how is that defensible in any way to literally physically use humans to block bullets between yourself?
Of course, it's that is a war crime. If you tie up a civilian to your jeep, that is a war crime.
Exactly.
If this would be proven against any Israeli officer or soldier, he will grow old in jail, for sure. There was, of course, that didn't happen during the Gaza campaign, and it's not a practice of the Israeli army. There used to be something until our court prohibited that. There used to be something that if the soldiers were closing in on a terrorist which was hiding inside the house, sometimes they would ask the neighbor to walk into this house and persuade the terrorist to walk out without the need for bloodshed. And it was done on a voluntary basis, that this neighbor really wants to go in the house and try to persuade his neighbor to come out and avoid the bloodshed. But even that, and I think it was justifiably so, that our court decided that this should be prohibited. It's not allowed. It does not go in accordance with the law of war. So that practice was revoked. We just don't do it anymore. But I would be more than happy if our enemies would also have a court system that can tell their combatants what to do or what not to do. It seems that this is an Israeli attribute, but our adversaries, they don't have that. They don't have any court system that will tell them this is a war crime, don't do that. Don't launch rockets over Israeli towns and villages in purpose. That is a war crime. We don't have that. We have something else. We have government incitement, which is telling them this is the right thing to do.
So you're saying because there's not a dual system of courts equally within both nations, even though the UN has accused Israel of war crimes, in Operation Cast Lead, they said that there was an excessive use of phosphorus against civilian targets such as hospitals and schools, even past the parameters of even civil conflict. I mean, that's leaving civilians aside.
Again, I'm not sure if I got your point exactly, but when you speak about the UN, what is the UN? The UN is the sum of its members. Understand that? The UN Council of Human Rights had in the past some honorable members like Libya, like Iran, countries that really care about human rights. So the UN accused Israel. That is actually to say that the members of the UN accused Israel. Israel is one country, one Jewish country. You have in the UN more than 20 Arab countries. You have in the UN more than 60 Islamic countries or Muslim countries. This group of Muslim countries, Muslim and Arab countries, compose the majority, or let's say, this is the largest group of countries within the non-aligned movement. Let me explain in one sentence what is the non-aligned movement. This is the movement, this is the group of countries of the third world. During the time of the Cold War, there used to be this kind of coalition between the countries of the third world, countries of a lot of the countries of Africa, countries in Asia, countries in Latin America. The Muslim and Arab countries are the largest group within this coalition, the non-aligned movement. This coalition numbers something like 130 states. This is the largest number of states within the UN system. Since the Arab and Muslim countries are the largest group within this group, they can get the other states or the other countries to agree with them on their issues, namely about Israel, because the other states in this group will need the Arab and Muslim states on their issues. So this is like you scratch my back and I will scratch yours. Why should some countries in Africa and Latin America, why shouldn't they support the Arab and Muslim states on Israel when they can get the Arab and Muslim states to vote for them on their issues? So it's very easy to the enemies of the state of Israel to recruit behind them the majority of the UN members. Because that is how the UN works. It works by voting blocks. And the Arab and Muslim group is a very big group in terms of voting blocks. 60 countries. Israel is just one country. So the fact that the UN accused Israel doesn't mean anything. This is just a power politics within the UN. It doesn't mean that it is just. It doesn't mean that it is true. It's not an objective court.
I understand the premise of law ruling and how that works. But what I'm saying is if you justify your nation's boundary on a resolution drafted by the first UN hegemonic powers, the US, Soviet Union, and Israel, how could you later denounce the validity of statements of the UN essentially on the same fact? It seems as though law ruling is beneficial in some points. It gets approved or it gets the seal where we understand that it is supposedly valid, and at other times just completely ignored and swept under the rug. And I'm just asking how that's justifiable.
I'm not basing Israel's right to exist does not come from the UN. Israel's right to exist, like any other country, comes from the fact that we are there. And we want to continue to be there. That is like any other country. We don't need the UN to justify our existence. If tomorrow the UN will decide that the US has no right to exist, so what, we'll just go home? Just go somewhere else?
I want to say to you on the fact that
just a second. I refer to the UN decision because somebody here said that the settlements are not legal according to international law. So I refer to international law. But I'm not saying that this is what gives us the right to exist. What gives us the right to exist is the fact that we are there. And we want to continue to be there.
I just want to say that I agree with you 100% on that last point.
Sorry?
What was the point said? That what gives you existence is the fact that you're there. And that you want. I think that everybody in this room, in one way or another, shaped that to be the decisive argument.
But that is true regarding any other state. Don't, you gotta be realistic. States exist because they are there. Not because of international law.
Like Palestinians.
Like Palestinian people are there.
I just want to say, kind of like, do you think that a two states would actually work? Like, the Americans, when we took over, all Americans and the Native Americans, we basically killed off 98% of them. But with Palestinians, they're not going to go away and they're not going to forget. So how do you think, accounting for the fact that people remember and that people are always going to remember because they're going to be there unless they, decide to have like a genocide. How is the two-part state going to work? Like, how are people going to accept it? Because I agree, you should look to the future.
If you look to the future, you just have, at some point, you're going to have to let go of the past. Otherwise there will be no future. But equating the situation of Native Americans and the situation of the Palestinians is just completely wrong. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Native Americans did not wage an all or nothing war against the white people that came from Europe. It was not like that. In our case,
they waged a lot. It was like 70 years of war. existed, they didn't want
But
they
it
didn't
wasn't.
want
But
their-
it wasn't the Native Americans. The Native Americans did not say we're going to kill all of you. It wasn't like that. It was the other way around.
The Native
Yeah, but
American
they
ones
were
are in
there. I'm saying
response.
that
You're
this
saying
place-
what you're
this
saying. What
place-
you're saying is white Americans, right, committed genocide. That is what you're saying. In our case, it was the Palestinians that declared that they want to commit genocide against the Jews. So they waged the war. They lost. They fled. There was no genocide. There were no mass murders. There was a war. One side lost the war. Many of them fled. We're not going to allow them to come back in.
But I mean the
That's it.
displacement of the people who were historically there, because in
They
the
should,
1920s.
they should be responsible for their actions. That's it.
So the Denison
People are
massacre,
responsible for their actions.
But that's what I'm saying, do you feel like people are going to be able to look to the future? Given, I mean, I feel like it's
I hope so.
understandable that people are upset and that they're, you know, because they've been displaced, but.
And look, and it was already 60 years ago. I mean, it's like me.
60 years ago.
Part of my family is from Poland, and they got to Israel after the Second World War and the Holocaust. So if I will now claim to have the right for the home in Warsaw that my family had once, so I cannot really expect some person in Warsaw to give up on his home for me. It's not realistic. That is changing back the wheel of history. It's not going to happen. Whatever I say, it's not going to happen, and I don't want it. And I want to look towards the future. And I hope that they will do the same. Because, frankly, if they don't even support the two-state solution, then the conflict will just go on and on. Nobody wants that. I want to hope that nobody wants that.
So, as you mentioned earlier, that part of the danger is being like the richest kid on the block. Even though, for example, the UAE has 25% higher GDP, nobody being enemy with that part. But my question is...
I meant our neighborhood, not their neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
The neighborhood on the Gulf.
Oh,
that
it's
is
the Middle
something
East
else.
except UAE. My question is, for example, in the 90s there was a good peace truce, which I think could have been a good start for a two-state solution. Until the year 2000, somebody was running for prime minister, ran with 3,000 soldiers into the Aqsa Mosque, ruining the peace truce. So do you think Israel has done its homework to maintain that solution?
I'm not sure that I understood what you meant, but in the year 2000, there was a meeting in Camp David. Our Prime Minister made an offer to the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. It was written down, it was in detail. It was about getting 100% of the disputed land with adjustments. He turned it down. And after he turned it down, he gave the instructions to launch the second Intifada, which was a wave of terrorism, suicide bombers, and we know the rest is written in history. So these are just the facts. He turned it down. And it wasn't the first time that they turned down the 1947 resolution, the ideas of compromise that were before that. After 1967, when Israel came to control these territories, we said to the Arab countries that ruled them before, we said, we are ready to give everything back for peace. They said no. It was the Khartoum conference with the famous three no's. They said no, we don't want that. We want to destroy it.
So I'm talking about the armed conflict.
We just see the same thing happening all over again.
You said many times that we should put the past behind us. So assume we do put the past behind us. And you also said that Israel is a democratic state, which is Jewish. So for me, that's a bit of an oxymoron, to be democratic and be Jewish. That's like saying if the U.S. were to follow...
Okay, stop here.
Could I continue?
Answer the point that you
Could I just
made.
add one more point? If
Continue after I answer, okay?
can I please? Could you give me?
More official that way, please.
Go for it.
More efficient. Sorry.
And
That
official.
is the
Yes.
point that many people raise. When I'm saying that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people, that does not contradict the fact that it's a democratic state. And it's not the only one. There are many others like, if you look at Greece, Germany, the Czech Republic, Ukraine, when I served before, Poland, many other countries in Europe. Most of the countries in Europe are nation state. The nation state of the Poles, the nation state of the Greeks, the nation state of the Czechs. Look at what happened after the Soviet Union collapsed. Many nation states. But that doesn't mean that they're not democratic, because all the citizens of those states can vote, and they have equal rights.
Which is not the case in Israel.
But in terms of the sign of the country, the cultural identity of the country, there is one group of people which is predominant. We are nothing different in that respect. So that was for your first point.
Okay, and so yeah, as I was saying, if we want to ultimately be democratic, wouldn't the ideal solution be a one state where a Palestinian has an equal rights as an Israeli, whether Muslim, Christian, Jew? I mean, if that was the case, it would just be like the U.S. I mean, you don't see African Americans or Hispanics having different rights than.
The difference is that we are not living in the U.S. We are living in the Middle East.
I mean, two wrongs don't make a right. You don't compare yourself to the worst. You compare yourself to the best.
It's not about that at all. It's not about that at all. It's about the fact that if we do that, that will not be a recipe for peace. That will be
so equality is not a recipe for peace.
That will be a recipe for another civil war. And if we look at what happened in Iraq, when you had different ethnicities and religions, if you look at what happened in Sudan, if you look at what happens in Algeria, in Lebanon, you name it, we don't want to be part of that. We don't want to be part of it. We see what Arabs, Sunnis and Arab Shiites are doing to each other in Iraq. We are not Arab and we are not even Muslims. So what they will do to us in the country with the Palestinian majority.
You're Jewish, exactly. Were there not Jews in the 1800s? Were they not living peacefully in the land of whatever you want to call it, Israel, Palestine?
This was under the Turkish Empire, it was something else.
But were they living peacefully, the Jews and the Arabs?
Under the Turkish
Under the Ottoman rule.
That was a different world. We're speaking about this reality. I'm not ready to go through 3 centuries of slaughtering and civil wars in order to get there. I want a better future for me and for my children and for the Arab children now. I don't want to go through a horrible civil war. And we do have the historical right to be a nation state like the Czechs and all the rest. And we don't want to deny the Palestinians of this right. But
so wouldn't the logical solution be to share the land equally?
No, because this land will be Palestinian. Because what you're speaking about,
because naturally it is Palestinian.
Is the one-state solution, and not just the one-state solution. The one-state solution with allowing all those refugees to come back, flooding this country with Palestinians, and within the first democratic elections, you will have a Palestinian state there. Now this is
you'll have a state for both, and
they can have their state either in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. If they want more territory, then they have a problem. That's it.
So you're telling me,
if they're not ready for compromises, then yes, we have a problem.
Okay, so my grandparents, who are from Jaffa, do not have the right to go back to Jaffa because, can you explain why?
Because they were a part of the Palestinian or Arab collective who decided to go to an all-out.
They did not decide.
Whatever. They have to be responsible for the decisions of the Arab collective.
You can't just say whatever.
In the 1948 war. That is just a fact of history. They will not go back. They will not go back. If they want to go back.
So you should omit democratic from your definition because you're not democratic. The different countries that you mentioned, they accept immigrants for, they have different definitions for, what kind of immigrants they can accept, but they accept immigrants not for being German. But you are not accepting any kind of immigrant except unless he's a Jewish person.
It's not
a Jewish person anywhere in the world has more rights than a Palestinian that lived in the land of Palestine for generations. Even, and you probably know that Jewish newcomers, the first day they arrive to Israel, they have rights more than the Palestinian citizens of Israel that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. So how is that democratic?
Many countries in the world have repatriation law, including many countries in Europe like Germany, the Czech Republic. Almost all the countries which are nation states, they have this law. So basically, if you are born to Greek parents, that were living, not just parents, grandparents, and they're living in the U.S. for 2 generations, but you are from a Greek family. You can come back to Greece and become a Greek citizen. That is exactly the law of repatriation that we have in Israel. And I think we have to limit it to one more question.
So could my grandparents go back to Palestine and?
We're gonna do one more question, and then we'll conclude. So, actually, you guys.
Like maybe somebody who hasn't asked.
Yeah.
I have a few parts to this. First of all, we have sat
I'll try
here.
to limit it to one because.
I'll merge it all into one. We have sat here while you were giving your presentation and listened to you with respect. More than once, when we were giving our questions and our comments, you said our points and our numbers don't matter, or it's not important, that it's not social equality in this room. And if you say you want peace and to live together with 2 states, is it peace when you don't allow a man into your country for the fear of it being taken over? So what is your definition of peace? You know, realistically, there is no solution, because there are too many people, too many governments involved in this, too much money involved in this, for it to be, okay, you go your way, I go my way, that's it. It's not going to happen, realistically.
What do you want to happen? You certainly have an opinion. How do you see it happening? What's the solution? What will be the end result? What do you want it to be?
What do I want it to be?
Yes.
Justice, equality. Oh, that's it.
No, I asked you.
Excuse me. Keep to the one.
What do I want it to be?
Because this is an open room, everybody can speak his mind, so please speak your mind.
You know, I just want everyone to be happy. You, not you, Israel, the Israelites, they were given that land. But there were already people occupying the land. Like, we came to the United States when there were Native Americans living in this land. It's just the way things work. Like, it's happened in the past, it's going to happen again, it's going to happen in the future, how this happens. There's not going to be a proper solution to it. It's just the way it happens. It's the system.
So what you're saying is that just the brute force should have its
You
way?
move forward, you know, help people, you know, let people into Palestine to help the Palestinians who are in trouble, who need the aid.
So you want the state of Israel to cease to exist?
Are you putting words in his mouth?
How's that
Excuse me. Excuse
say
me.
that?
This is a dialogue between the two. This is the final question. We're answering.
Do you want the state of Israel to cease to exist?
I'm not commenting on that at all. I'm just saying we need to move forward, because we're living in a system right now, and yes, people can stand up all they want, how they have the wall of lies. Now, there's nothing wrong with people speaking their mind on both parties. There's nothing wrong you coming here and giving us your presentation. There's nothing wrong with us coming here and speaking our minds. But what we need to do is move forward, like you said, is look into the future. But we cannot forget about the past. You always got to be staring in your rearview mirror about what has happened. But things can't happen the way a lot of people want it to happen. It can't.
You support the one state solution. That is, I mean,
Can I ask,
Yes, I
actually,
understand what it means.
this will provide you with a chance for rebuttal, okay.
no, but we said one more question, so
But-
you know what, I will stay here for a few minutes, you can ask me, but.
I just want to know what
Are we
kind of
finished?
concessions Israel
Okay.
is willing to make.
Thank you very much. You can stick around after. Let's give him a round of applause.